Hey, what's up, resin heads? Welcome to Make 3D TV, where we help you find success with your resin 3D prints. Today I'm talking with my friend Garret. Many of you know him as 3DPrintFarm here on YouTube. I consider this guy to be the go-to guy if you want to learn anything about 3D printing. In this interview, we talk about how to make money with 3D printing, the advantages of the mono screens on the newer resin 3D printers, and more. This covers the highlights of our discussion. I provided a link to the longer version here and in the description. Okay, let's go. Let's make 3D. Have you looked at ways to make money with 3D printing, and have you discovered anything aside from monetizing your YouTube channel, or have you tried selling anything on Etsy or any of that type of thing?
Well, that's one of those things I wanted to. I'd actually wanted to pursue that, and one of the things that I wanted to pursue, and in fact, anyone can. It's just to find the right folks to do it. Is the miniature in all these fantasy miniatures that people are painting now and doing. A lot of people are spending time at home. There's a lot of more people than I thought were doing these gaming miniatures.
Mm-hmm.
I helped a guy. In fact, he's one of my sponsors. That I helped him with his. It's not Patreon, but it's a Patreon-esque kind of thing. He started his own group, and he's out of Brazil. And he contacted me and said, "Hey, can you help me? Launch my site. We'll give some discount codes." The guy was smart because he got with Blackmagic Crafts. And that guy's got probably in the hundreds of thousands of subscribers on YouTube. And he also got with one other gentleman that does, I think it's called Squidmar something or other. And it's another YouTube channel that they have over 100,000 subscribers. So he got with them and said, "Hey, I'll give you these discount codes. I'll knock $5 off. I'll give you 100 of them." He gave me 50 to give away, and they were gone. The day I launched my video, the discount codes were gone. They were just used up. So
what platform was he on?
It's his own. It's lootstudios.com is his website, but
Okay.
He's not on Patreon. It's his own platform. So he didn't like the way Patreon was run. So he started his own platform. But you would be surprised on the number. I've had at least 5 contacts in the last month or so after doing one of my videos where I focused on the miniatures of all of these Patreon type sites saying, "Hey, will you showcase my model? Will you mention my model? Will you do this? And here we'll give you access to all of our STLs. We'll do this and we'll do that." And a lot of these Patreon sites, they have different levels. The first one's like, "Hey, I'll give me $1 just to help me survive, buy me a coffee," that kind of thing. A couple others will be like, for this level, the $5 level will give you 2 miniatures. The $10 level will give you run the gamut of the site. But for $40, we will give you the rights to print anything that we have on our site and physically print them and sell them. So basically you're buying a license.
Oh, right.
For $30 a month. And so I've noticed this. You can go out to Etsy now and look up miniatures. In fact, if you want to look up, let's see, what's a good one? I think cast and play. The cast and play is a biggie. And if you type like cast and play in Etsy, you're going to see like 3 guys, and they sell cast and play models. And if you look in the description, they'll say, "We are licensed to sell cast and play models."
Oh, wow. I thought I saw Zane Rogers one on there.
Yes. Yeah. I think there's a Zane Rogers one on there as well. Thing? And yes, he is. And
okay.
What's really interesting about this is you see some of these guys that are printing these 32 millimeter. So I don't know if I have a 32 millimeter one handy here, but they're stinking tiny. Okay. These 32 millimeter characters, these people are printing these on, and on they're one of these machines you've got here. And, you could probably print a dozen of them on one of these build plates, and they're selling them for $12 to $15 a pop. And I'm thinking, okay, there's nothing in resin to this. Now you do have some wear and tear on your printer, but there is literally nothing in resin. And it's one of these things where you don't have to you have zero inventory. You don't have to keep anything in stock unless you want to print one, just to show this is what it's like. And you have a disclaimer in there saying, hey, if you want to if you order this, you're going to have to give me X amount of lead time to be able to create it for you, and then I'll ship it to you. And what I've noticed here recently is if you go out to a lot of these Etsy pages, you'll see little disclaimers in there saying, due to increased demand, you need to give me at least 2 to 3 weeks to send this stuff out. So that sends a little red light, and it sends a little light off in my head thinking, okay, this dude is like making bank because he's getting so many orders in, because not everyone has resin printers. And you have a lot of people that are into the FDM printers, and there's lots of people that use those, but resin is a special breed of folks. Not everyone wants to get into the toxicity, and
I see a lot of that.
Oh yeah.
The FDM guys don't want to do the resin. They don't even want to mess with it.
Nope. And you cannot get the resolution as you get with the resin that you do with the FDM. So, and then people are getting into these Kickstarters that make the tiles, they make these little interlocking tiles that you would use for Dungeons and Dragons type games. And these people are getting all these backers. And I'm thinking, I'm missing an opportunity here. And if I can get with one of these sponsors to say, hey, I'll mention your Patreon site in one of my videos in exchange for a top tier level membership on your site. You give me exclusive rights to sell your stuff, and then I'll, every once in a while I'll give you a shout out, and that's one of those things where it's not really a sponsorship, but you're just basically giving them a shout out, just saying, hey, this cool model here was printed by, or this cool model is by Printed Obsession. You can find him over here, and I'll post a link in the description below on how you can find his stuff. And they go crazy over that kind of thing.
What are a couple of your videos that you've done that your viewers really responded to?
The ones that responded to the most was probably the photon validator video. I did 2 surrounding that one. The one I did 9-ish months or so ago got a lot of views because it was one of those things that people really needed it, but they didn't know it was out there. It was like, because they were used to putting a print in Chi2 box or whatever, putting a print in Chi2 box, and it's like, okay, I'm going to add supports, I'm going to add auto supports, and I'm going to print it. And now the arm of the knoll or the arm of the troll, it didn't print. So I thought I went through and did it, but this photon file validator, it would go through and it would identify each and every layer and find out the spots on that layer. It's like, hey, you got a spot here, and it's more than 3 pixels deep, and it's not going to print. No matter what you do, it's going to fail. And it would allow you to go into Chi2 box, find layer 117 or whatever it is, and add your own support. And people really dug that. They really got into it. And when I initially explained it, it was like one of those things where I missed some things. So I went back. In fact, I got in touch with Zane Rogers and says, hey, dude, can I use one of your prints? And it's like, yeah, let me send it to you. So he sent me one of his, I think it was an Oni mask. So these Japanese masks. And I stuck it in Chi2 box, and I did kind of an updated version of that. And that got a lot of hits too. So it was like one of those things where people are really, really interested in the support side and how to fix stuff. Any kind of tips and tricks that is kind of groundbreaking that no one else uses, those tend to really do well. Especially if no one's either heard of them or I know Uncle Jesse, when you had mentioned earlier about making money, the way he made, he had a video where he made $18,000 on Etsy. And the funny thing is, it wasn't anything that he invented. It was, right. He found a guy over on Twitter that created this Xbox gizmo that fit over an Xbox controller that allowed you to, be more effective in driving games. And he got with the guy, and he did it the right way. I mean, he didn't steal his idea. He went with the guy and said, "Hey, I'd love to print this out. I'd love to do this, but I need your permission." And somehow the guy, I don't know what kind of a deal the guy worked out with him, but Uncle Jesse worked the deal out, and he put his FDM printers to work. I mean, he just started printing these things, and he still makes money on Etsy today. I mean, he's got one for PlayStation controllers now, one for Xbox, and it's just a little plastic gizmo with some skateboard bearings, that looks like a little steering wheel that you can use for your thumbs.
And he's probably printed so many of them, he just crank them out now.
Yeah, he just cranks them out.
What to do.
Yep.
Which printers do you have that are your favorites?
FDM or resin?
Let's do resin.
Let's do resin. Probably the Frozen Sonic Mini is my favorite so far. And the reason being is it's because it's so fast and it prints stuff so good. I think every resin printer needs to have a monochrome screen. That's my opinion.
And that leads us into the next question, which was the monochrome versus RGB. Mm-hmm. You and I had a little conversation about that. You want to explain why the monochrome screen is better, aside from it printing faster?
Well, when resin printers started out, and like when the Anycubic Photon, even before that, the advent of the DLP resin printer used RGB screens. Most of these screens were actually surplus cell phone screens, and they were built to a certain specification for a cell phone. And the RGB screens, they have their advantages. I mean, the one advantage is they're cheap. They're very inexpensive. So when an RGB screen goes out, which is quite common if you're printing a lot, the replacements are $25. You can replace an RGB screen, and it's some of these printers are not that difficult to replace. It's basically just removing some tape and then unplug something and pop the screen in there. But again, that's kind of a hassle. The RGB, of course, the red, green, blue, the UV light is not going to pass through, hence the red covers that you see on all these resin printers. The red light is going to completely pass through. The green light's going to completely pass through. So all you have left basically is the blue light that is actually going to cure any of that resin. So you've got a lot of wasted energy and heat. So these RGB screens, they have to work overtime. So like on this,
so that the screens absorb the red and the green.
Yes, that's
what you're saying, and that produces heat.
That produces heat.
Okay,
and it over time, with the resin being so close to that screen, because you've got your build plate here, and it's flat against that screen. It's building up all this heat, and these screens, they aren't meant to take that type of abuse. And so what a lot of people start seeing is they'll start printing stuff, and they'll start noticing these holes in their prints. And they're like, well, why did I get this hole in my print? Everything looks fine. And then they'll do a resin test, and they'll see they'll turn the UV light on, and you'll see little black spots that will appear on the screen. Well, those are actually dead spots on the actual RGB screen. So that's it's one of those things where you're going to have to either replace it. And the guy that I talked to that actually developed these validation matrix testing, he's done all this crazy research on actually how to take cell phones, how to take these old screens that have these dead pixels and rejuvenate them, and just all these crazy things. It's like, wow. Dude, why are you doing that? It's just got kind of a recyclable kind of a thing. But with monochrome screens, I mean, it's kind of like the black and white televisions that we were kids. It's the light is either on or it's either off. So you're getting pure light with no filtration that's curing this stuff. So what would normally take, my Elegoo Mars over here, 8 seconds to expose resin and cure, I can do it in 3 to 4 seconds on the Frozen Sonic Mini. Now, a lot of people ask me though, well, why doesn't the Frozen Sonic Mini print it in half the time? Why is it only a third of the time? Because that's a big question. It's like, well, why does your monochrome printer only printing in a third of the time that this one does? I thought it's supposed to print twice as fast. Well, that's the amount of time that it cures a normal layer. You have lifting speed, and then you have the lowering speed. It's like your printer can't do this. It's not going that fast. It cures quickly, but you still have that lifting speed, and then you have it lowering. So you're only having that normal exposure speed. So the lifting and the rising and the lowering that takes the time. But it does give you, I feel it gives you a crisper print. They say the monochrome screens last probably 2 to 3 times as long as RGB because they don't put out as much heat. And again, a lot of these companies that I've contacted in their pipeline, I think there's a printer called an Elfin. I've been contacted by them. They're coming out with a new resin printer that's monochrome screen only. I know the Elegoo is coming out with the Saturn. If you were fortunate enough to get on one of the pre-sales on the 2 batches of Saturns they released, that's going to be a monochrome screen, which is going to be a big deal. Everyone's going to want one of those Saturns because it's twice as big as the Mars, and you're going to be able to print so many cool things on it, with that monochrome screen, and your objects are going to come out so much sharper. And that's another thing with the RGB on some of your models. At a microscopic level, if you look at an object that's printed on an RGB screen, you have it's almost a smooth characteristic. It's almost a smoothness around the pixels.
It's rounded.
It's rounded,
right?
And it's from light bleed. It's because you have. It's not. It's almost like you have a camera lens that's not focused.
Yeah, 100%. around the edges. It's not a clean border, basically.
Exactly. Right. And it's almost like it's why they have some of these printers have anti-aliasing, so they'll have that set up. But from a true monochrome printer, when you look under a microscope at like I looked at one that I printed in some like a green looking resin. I mean, it looks like little Lego blocks. When you blow that up, it's something in a 50 micron print. It looks like teeny tiny Lego blocks, and all of those blocks are just sharp and crisp compared to one from one of these other ones. I mean, they're fine, but I mean, if you put them side by side, there's really no comparison. There's no comparison to the quality that you're going to get. So you get longevity, you get a better quality print, you get less heat. The downside is at first they'll probably be more expensive because they're not going off of a surplus of cell phone screens. So these all have to be made over again. So when the supply, it's your classic supply and demand. Once the supply gets up, and you'll see a drop in price with them. But shoot, they last a long time. So, and I think that's the trend. I think that's where everyone's going right now, and that's where it should go. Is go all monochrome.
I wonder how they keep the black, they keep the black pixels from getting hot on the monochrome.
That's a good question.
I wonder if it's like a one-way mirror type situation.
It could be because I know they use a matrix. So I know the Frozen Sonic Mini uses they use a UV matrix. So like with the Anycubic Photon and the Elegoo Mars, they use like it's almost like a cone of steel. It's almost like a mirror. So you have your emitter, your UV emitter, and so it's this cone reflects the light up to your screen here, and you will get some light bleed around. But with the Frozen Sonic Mini, there's actually an array. It looks like bubbles. So they're actually little focusing lenses that will focus that UV light to try to get it tighter. And it's not perfect because I know some guys, the guy that I spoke with that developed this validation matrix, He's actually developed it's either a plate glass or something that fits over there that actually will focus the screen, focus that UV light a lot more tight, because they've noticed on some of the monochrome screens that some of the items that are on the perimeter of the screen tend to get a little washed out. So it's like most of your area is concentrated right in the center, but as you get around the perimeter, they don't print as well around the perimeter. So if you're right on the edge, and it has to do with light bleed from those UV matrix.
What are the most common print failure issues that you see?
Most common print failures. Most of them are that I see probably deal with underexposure. And let's talk about the first one would be your bottom exposure layers. So those first layers that stick to the build plate, those would be your bottom layers. And typically they should be around 10 times whatever the normal layer is. So let's say you have an 8-second layer, you want your bottom layers to be around 80 seconds, which may be a little on the hot side. But basically what you're doing is you're cooking that layer on the build plate so it sticks. So, depending on, I've seen people do 2 or 3 layers, which that's not near enough, and a lot of it has to do with maybe their build plate is not level. If your build plate's not level, then you're going to have some delamination on that plate. So your print's going to fail. But the more layers that you get cooked on there, let's say it's 5 to 6 layers, 7 layers, you're going to get a better stick. So that's one of the first things I tell people to look at, is that if your print is failing, if it's falling off, you'll see prints that, let's say this is the build plate, and you'll see this, and you'll see a print that looks like this. It's just kind of hanging there. Okay, well, that's because they didn't have enough bottom layer exposure to really get that to stick well. In fact, there's a company that sells resin away, and I can't think of the name, the company that sells it, but they actually sell a resin. It's kind of silly, but they actually coat the plate with this real high curing resin, and what it does is it makes stuff stick really, really strong. And I never really liked that stuff, just because I don't want to have to take a chisel and try to get the print off. And that's another thing. If it's really, really stuck on there, maybe you should start backing down on your bottom layer exposure times. Again, underexposed prints are going to cause delamination. So what I mean by delamination is when you're printing something and you've got your print here, and you start doing this thing where you're not the layers, because your resin prints are built by layers, maybe 1,000 layers tall. If those layers don't cure like they're supposed to, they won't stick to the layer underneath it. So the layers will start to delaminate, and then you'll start getting these things your print will start separating and pulling away, kind of like an FDM printer. If you don't have your bed leveled enough, and you'll see your print start to delaminate between the lines. It's the same difference. Again, you'll start losing details in your print. They'll print these miniatures that are 32 millimeters tall, and like I said, it's like, why are the eyes missing? Why are the glasses gone?
They almost look like they're starting to melt?
Yes, yes, exactly.
Lack of detail or whatever.
Yeah, lack of detail, and it's because on the spectrum, if you are underexposed prints have smaller than normal detail. Overexposed prints have larger than normal detail. So, if you're printing really tiny stuff and they're underexposed, you're losing a lot of detail, and a lot more possibility of failure, I guess you'd say. And then supports are another thing. There's 1,001 ways.
That was my next question.
It's 1,000. There's 1,001 ways. 1,001 ways to do supports. I mean, there's a guy out there. What is this YouTube channel? 3D Printing Pro. I guess he's an attorney or something like that. And a lot of people like him. A lot of people like his stuff, and he has some real unorthodox ways of supporting stuff. And some of them are really cool because he tries to use the fewest amount of supports with the least amount of contact points.
I've seen that. Yeah.
And you pull stuff apart because you don't want, that's really the sucky thing about resin printing is you get your prints cleaned up. You've got these little nubs, and inevitably it always happens to me, I'll cure something and I'll go back and I'll miss something. And it's like, oh crap, I missed a nub. And you go with your little nippers and clip it off and you end up leaving a divot in in your model. So it's just like, oh, this is stupid. So inevitably what I'll do is I'll get like a needle. I'll just dip it in resin just to get like a little droplet of it and put it in the divot and then hit it with a UV flashlight and then it's gone. And then maybe a little sandpaper if you need to. So if you want to get real picky about it, a lot of them is just like, I'm just throwing these things together and, I'm not going to be doing any, painting them or anything. So if it's hidden or something like that, that's one thing, but supports, you could do an entire episodes on supports.
Well, this guy's got a whole channel on supports.
Oh, I know it. He does. Yeah. I mean, and there's a couple of them there's a couple other guys that are coming out with supports. In fact, that's another way to make money. If you're good at supports, you can pretty much hire yourself out as a support guy. And a lot of these Patreon folks that sell these miniatures, they are people have asked them, hey, we want our miniatures supported. We're paying our $10 a month and, we don't want to have to work at it. We want pre-supported stuff. And so I've actually been approached by a couple of folks saying, hey, how much would you charge us to support all of our models month to month? And I'm like, dude, I don't want to have anything to do with that. I don't know.
Well, you got different printers that the supports are going to work on some printers and they're not going to work on others.
Exactly.
So you got to choose the lowest common denominator.
And I've seen too many nightmares of people come because inevitably what happens is this. It's happened with some of the folks I've worked with. Is people come back and it's like, oh, it doesn't work. Your supports don't work. So now they're having to, it's like, well, it worked on my Mars, but it didn't work on my Photon. It didn't work on my Longer. It didn't work on this. And so people are freaking out. And then now you've got the owners of the Patreon having to second guess themselves saying, well, did I pay this guy to support my models? Is it the right way? Is it the wrong way? And it's like, there's so many factors, it's just like, well, is the guy, what kind of resin is he using? Is he underexposing his, probably more than likely he's underexposing his prints. And when he did that, his prints are failing. And, it's not like printing the Rook. It's, there's a reason why it's doing that. And, but I'm not going to get into that gig because that takes too much time.
I think I saw one where a guy had bought a model that was pre-supported and he was trying to figure out how to remove the support so he could add his own or to add extras or whatever.
Yeah, it depends on how the file type is saved. If it's saved as a particular file type, a lot of folks, they'll allow you to go in there and remove the supports.
Oh, so like if they save it as a Chi2 box project or something, then they can do whatever they want with it.
Yeah. Once they slice it, and if I've tried to open files that are sliced and you get that grainy looking image, you're thinking, what the heck is that? It's because you've opened a file that's already been sliced and there's really nothing you can do with it.
Right.
Now, a lot of people get into this Prusa slicer, which is, it's one that the guy put out with Josef Prusa. They developed their own resin slicer, and the supports on those, I haven't played around with it as much as I'd like to, but they say the auto supports on the Prusa slicer is not bad.
All right. Well, that's all I had. I appreciate you coming on with me. Thanks for your time.
No problem.
We went a little long, but a lot of great information. I appreciate you sharing all your expertise.
Cool. I enjoyed it.
All right. Thanks.
All right, buddy.
All right. Take care.